Welcome. We are at Money 2020 in sunny Las Vegas, and I'm here with Chad Cascarilla, CEO of Paxos. Chad, will you tell everyone a little bit about your background and how you came to start Paxos?
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Paxos is born out of my background, which has mainly been in financial services. I spent my career as an investor, and then really coming out of the financial crisis, it was clear to us that the plumbing of the financial system exacerbated the crisis. And being able to use blockchain technology to re-platform how assets move and where they sit can really create enormous shifts in both inclusion and innovation within the financial system. And the goal for Paxos is to be the financial infrastructure that enables that.
And did you form Paxos kind of prior to volume starting on it and adoption and kind of the market came to you?
Yes. When you start to build an infrastructure company, usually you do that as you hit more of a mainstream adoption curve. But because financial services is so regulated, you really have to be able to, I think, see over the horizon. And that's what we did in building Paxos. We thought of two pillars of the business. One is that you have a regulatory stack, and on the other hand, you also have a technology and product infrastructural stack. Mm-hmm. And the combination of those two allow you to be infrastructure that is dependent upon. And so in the early adopter community, infrastructure, especially regulated infrastructure, has, I would say, a limited amount of utility for those types of early players. And really over the last 18 months, there's been a huge shift from early adopter to mainstream. Yeah. And that is, I guess, the market really starting to recognize how transformative this technology can be, not just for crypto assets, but for all traditional assets as well.
So walk us through a couple of use cases, where your infrastructure is being used by certain clients and how that is sort of better than how they prior did that transaction.
So if you think about blockchain, what it's really allowing you to do is know who owns what when. And what it's enabling that asset to do is move instantaneously at any time. And so Bitcoin, which is a native blockchain asset, moves instantaneously for relatively low cost, though not always. Yeah. And it can move peer-to-peer without an intermediary. That's really transformative, but that's just Bitcoin. Imagine if you can take the $700 trillion of other assets in the world and also put them onto a blockchain to move around. And so probably the most notable example of doing that is with dollars. And there's a lot of conversation now around taking dollars, putting them on a blockchain, and what does that mean? What should be the regulatory umbrella? I think we have really great answers that are unique around how to do that because of how regulated we've been from the very beginning. And putting dollars on a blockchain is really important because today dollars only move on an electronic basis through banks. And banks are only open 9 to 5. And it takes a lot of time when you have to move money overseas. There's a lot of costs. And maybe just as importantly, something like 26% of adults in the U.S. are unbanked or underbanked. Yeah. So you don't even have a bank account for a lot of people. And outside the U.S., it maybe is 40 or 50% of the population. So if you have dollars on a blockchain, they can move immediately. Yeah. They can move anytime, 24/7, 365 days, very low cost, and you don't need to have an intermediary. That's a huge shift in how money moves.
So walk us through the Facebook announcement a couple of weeks ago so that everybody sort of understands this particular use case.
Yeah, this was really exciting for us because as an infrastructure firm, we have a number of large players and, of course, many other customers that use us. PayPal, Venmo, Interactive Brokers, Bank of America are some of them. And Facebook launching with us is perhaps the biggest potential customer. And when you look at how these firms are using us, it's for both our regulatory infrastructure and for this technology, meaning that they know that the products we've created have oversight, have a banking regulator that's looking at them, and therefore everything that we're doing has the right consumer protections and the right safety and soundness. And that's an important way of creating confidence in order for your products to be able to touch the maximum number of people, which ultimately we think of as much of the world's population as you can. Right. And so having Facebook come on is a really big deal because that's potentially 3 billion people that could potentially use our products. And what we created was a regulated dollar token, and they launched their remittance service between the U.S. and Guatemala using Paxos. And so the reason that's really exciting is you have an opportunity for unbanked and underbanked people to be able to send money for zero cost between the U.S. and Guatemala, and they're going to expand it beyond that. But this was a really big validation of what we've done at Paxos from this regulatory and infrastructure perspective, that someone can rely on us and use us. And I think if you look at when PayPal launched in crypto, which was actually 1 year ago, almost exactly. And we met them 2 years ago at Money 2020.
Yeah.
And then 1 year ago we launched them in the middle of the pandemic. And that was a huge watershed moment for crypto.
Yeah.
Before PayPal got in, people were afraid, and they were afraid to be first. And then after PayPal got in, they were afraid, but they were afraid to miss it. Mm-hmm. And I think Facebook Novi launching with stablecoins is actually the first example of any major company that's not really native to crypto using a stablecoin technology, using a blockchain-based dollar to do something new. And that's what's really exciting, is now you have validation of this concept that you can bring people into the financial system and you can allow them to be able to use it in a way that they haven't. And that's our technology that's enabling that. That's the infrastructure. This is how replatforming the financial system can be so powerful and really so transformative for all of society.
Yeah, no, it could be revolutionary, and the cost savings could be incredible. If we go back to the Venmo PayPal example, so walk through that particular use case so that it's very evident what Paxos does in that particular use case.
Yes, so a lot of times firms come to us and they want to be able to launch an asset they haven't been in, which tends to be crypto. So PayPal has not been involved in crypto, and nor Revolut or Interactive Brokers and a whole slew of others, and they want to be able to make it available to their customers because it's a great way of building a community, a great way of offering a new product type that they haven't had available before. Mm-hmm. And so in the case of PayPal and some of their other companies like Venmo, they needed an infrastructure provider that had the right type of regulatory oversight, mm-hmm. as well as the right type of infrastructure to be able to operate at that type of scale. And the reason they ended up choosing Paxos for their holding of crypto, as well as their buying and selling, is because, looking out at the landscape, no one had set themselves up in this way. Mm-hmm. And importantly, for the case of PayPal and Venmo and others, they start with crypto, but they want to change how money moves. PayPal's been very vocal about this. They want to be able to have any asset available to their customers. All these wallets are converging. And so crypto is something you have to have if you're an Interactive Brokers or retail broker. It's something you need to have if you're a payments app like Revolut or a payments app like PayPal. And it'll certainly be, I think, that case for other firms as well. You can imagine this has to be available from almost every financial institution over time.
And some of them would create it themselves, and some of them would go to you because you've built the infrastructure, it's fully regulated, it's fully compliant, and it's much more turnkey.
Yes.
And that's the advantage of turning to a Paxos.
I think so. What happens is you always do an analysis of build versus buy.
Yeah.
And what we've seen, even with the largest companies in the world, even the most technologically sophisticated companies in the world, this is not an easy build.
Yeah.
And what happens is you have to decide, where do I want to put my investment cycles? So what you've noticed in financial services over time historically is that infrastructure tends to be the common good. It tends to be more consolidated because the front end is very fragmented. Even JP Morgan, the largest institution in the US, only has 10% market share. So it's very fragmented. And so you can never put as much effort into infrastructure, even if you're that scale, as we can, because of how many different types of end users are using us. And ultimately, you want to focus on your customer if you're a business. And so division of labor comes into play here. And really specialization becomes very important. And as the crypto world has gone from being early adopter, where it was the AOL business model of we do everything for everybody, it's become about differentiation and therefore scale and specialization. And perhaps the last component is not just about the technology, but it's about the regulation.
Right.
So because we've spent 7 years building a lot of different regulatory approvals, we're the first trust that was approved in the state of New York to operate in crypto and blockchain, you have an ability to service customers in a way that they might not want to. Meaning they might not want to build that type of regulatory oversight. And they may even want to use our regulatory umbrella to house their customers. And this is a really unique position then that we're in, where it's the combination of being regulated and having a regulatory umbrella, plus the technology that works together to create this capacity to really service big customers as well as small ones, and to do it on a multi-asset basis. And that then gets us to the position of how you can replatform the financial system across an enormous amount of different types of assets.
Yeah, it's an incredible position. What's coming, in Washington, there's lots of discussion about regulation on stablecoins, regulation on digital assets. Is there any concern there that, any of this might be limiting in terms of what Paxos or your clients can do?
At the end of the day, I think we positioned ourselves very uniquely from a regulatory perspective because we thought that this would be the regulatory interpretation. But regulators move slow. And so when you're in that early adopter phase, it's either too small or it's moving too fast for people to really get their arms around. But a new administration has come in, and it's very focused on trying to use the regulatory levers to rein things in. And I think in a lot of examples that makes sense. I think the issue is that there's so many different regulators that might oversee certain parts of the industry. So you have the SEC, you have the CFTC, you have Treasury, you have the OCC, you go Federal Reserve, the White House, they're trying to coordinate exactly what will happen. And so no one knows exactly where it will go.
Right.
But I can say that the way we approached it was with the idea that the regulation would eventually catch up. And that would, of course, happen because if you want to have a societal level outcome, which is exactly why we built Paxos, to create a societal level outcome of replatforming the system, you have to expect that there's going to be regulation.
Right.
We thought that actually was the tool in order to create a huge outcome, which is about mainstream adoption.
And in creating value such that it's fully compliant and fully regulated, and thus you can have huge societal change.
Absolutely. You don't want to have the BitTorrent of the crypto world or the blockchain world. You want to have the Chrome browser. You want to have something that has just completely shifted everybody's lives. Yeah. And we worked backwards from that outcome, that expectation that that's what we could build. And that's what's taken us 7 years to get to this moment. Yeah. It's not something that happens overnight. And so the regulation could certainly crimp the broader industry in the near term, but I actually think it'll help Paxos and it'll actually help the industry be able to achieve bigger outcomes over time.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on all the recent adoption, and thank you for spending a few minutes with us here in Vegas. And I think it's back to Money 2020.